So this is the situation. The Constitution of Botswana on its own states that every person who is subjected to God should present himself with a lawyer. It does not say, well, if you don't have no money or you cannot afford a lawyer, the state should provide that for you. So this is the situation which actually is an instrument now that actually is effective in prosecuting dissidents. Because when I grew up as a young person in Mochudi village, there was a situation where we were subjected to a forced initiation school where there is male and female circumcision, where female adolescents are subjected to circumcision without their consent sometimes. And sometimes, in most cases, it was very risky. And not only that, there was a lot of ritual murderers in my village. I don't know if anybody of you are familiar with or know. I don't know if anybody of you know what ritual murders are, but it's basically when young people are murdered and their parts are mutilated for ritual purposes, and their harvests are actually mutilated. So this is the situation where, as a young man, I was growing on under those situations, and I had to live with it. And as I grew up, I had to either stand up against it or accept it, and maybe end up being killed or having my organs removed. When I grew up on my teenage level, when I was like around 15 years old, my dad, who was a proponent of the initiation school, and he had gone to the initiation school, and my mom had also gone to the initiation school when they grew up. So my dad was a proponent of this tribal school, and he wanted all of us, his children, to attend this school, and he wanted to forcibly do that. Two of my sisters were exposed to this. I was supposed to go, and I ended up running away because I was just literally scared. So I ran away, but I was hunted around by the village regime, and they wanted to force me because my dad just said they should take me. So basically I had to go to this initiation school. So I had to live on the street. I had to be away from home. My parents basically disowned me because I was disobeying their order. My mom wasn't really a proponent of this whole thing, but because she was a woman, she could not say no against my father, because women were not given any voice. She was afraid to speak out, even though she didn't really want this to happen to me. So I literally had to live on the streets and survive on my own and go to school while I'm running away from the tribal regime. I ended up joining some university students who were up against this whole ritual murdering and the initiation school, because the university students were asking government to probe the merits of the school and to know who are these ritual murderers in our village, who are they, and to bring them to justice. Unfortunately, just doing that brought me into trouble. The chief of my village was a very well-known, notorious for brutality, and he was he used out of intimidation and fear. He was feared. So I ended up pioneering an underground newsletter through my school, and I was printing it at the school. So my project ended up being exposed. So the school authorities took it, and it was handed over to the chief because he was really, really feared. So obviously I was in trouble. The chief, I was supposed to report to the customary court, to the chief himself, and I ended up being beaten. They took me at the customary court, and they whipped me in front of the crowd, which cheered the man who was whipping me. And then I grew up with that. I wanted wanted to stand up against this. But in the long run, I ended up facing criminal charges because the police were made to fabricate tales about me and say that, but to silence my antagonistic voice and say I'm a criminal. I ended up being brought to court. I was tortured by the police, and after they tortured me, they didn't tell me to have a legal right to speak with a lawyer or whatsoever. They just brought me to the courts, and the courts didn't care whether I have a lawyer or not. They just put me through the courts, and I was sentenced for 12 years in prison. I had to fight my life from inside prison to come out. I ended up coming out of prison through appeals and all that, without a legal representation whatsoever. When I came out of the prison, after a long struggle, in a really dangerous atmosphere in prison, there was a lot of HIV virus circulating in prison, and the conditions were overcrowded. There was overcrowding in the prisons, and chances that you will come out of that prison alive were always really slim. The only time if you survive to come out of prison, sometimes you will come out of prison with HIV/AIDS, with HIV positive. Unfortunately enough, I managed to come out clean, and I went outside. There was no anything when I come outside, even though my charges were dismissed at High Court. I wasn't given anything that reconciles me with the society or society with me. I had to go back to the same situations which could have led me to go back to prison. I had to live with a low self-esteem, with a stigma, in a country which has a low unemployment rate, and without any social welfare or allowance for people who don't have a livelihood, or anything that could help give them a decent livelihood. If I was a criminal under those circumstances, I could have committed a crime and go back to jail. I did. I stayed and I remained silent, knowing that if I speak out, I'll be in trouble. I stayed in under really difficult circumstances, and I lived under really difficult circumstances, unemployed, with parents who didn't really know what to do with me, with brothers and sisters who didn't really know what to do with me, because they were afraid to be victimized as well. Fortunately enough, I was picked up by an American woman who I just was stumbling on the street on an empty stomach, and I ended up in her office. I don't even know how I ended up there. She took me by the hand. She told me, "You have gone through a lot. What is your problem?" I told her what my problems were, and she took her lunch and she gave it to me to eat. After I ate her lunch, I kept telling her a story, and she asked me, "What do I want to do with my life?" I told her I want to do something with graphic design or media, whatever it is. I just want to go to school and study. So she decided to enroll me for a computer graphics course, and I ended up in school, in a private school. It wasn't really a big school. It was just a small private school, and I did everything I can to study and to excel, and I excelled in my school. And then under those circumstances, I ended up asking for attachment in a bookstore, for employment attachment in a bookstore. And that's where I ended up reading books, and I thought I want to be an author one day, and I wanted to be a writer, I wanted to be a journalist, and I thought this is the time for me maybe to be a journalist. And I thought maybe being a journalist will free me, will give me a chance to voice things out and write articles and do what I can to save those who are still living under those circumstances, and to try to make sure that what happened to me does not get repeated. What happened to us, the children of Mochudi village, does not get repeated.